For over 5 decades, humanity believed NASA led the race to Mars. But, recently, declassified KGB documents reveal a shocking truth. Between 1960 and 1973, the Soviet Union actually launched 19 secret missions to Mars, most of them ending in catastrophic failures, all buried under layers of Cold War secrecy. While Americans celebrated their public victories, USSR engineers were fighting a shadow war in space, desperately trying to beat America to the Red Planet. Hidden behind those generic Cosmos designations, these missions were basically erased from history. Today, we uncover the shocking truth about Soviet Mars exploration that nearly conquered another world. The secret war begins. October 1960 marked humanity's very first attempt at interplanetary exploration, and it exploded in, spectacular fashion. Soviet engineers at Baikonur Cosmodrome watched helplessly as their modified R-7 ICBM carrying Mars 1960A veered wildly off course just seconds after liftoff. The self-destruct command was sent immediately, obliterating the spacecraft and any evidence of the mission. 4 days later they tried again with Mars 1960B. This time the rocket reached Earth orbit, but the upper stage failed to ignite, leaving the probe stranded. Within hours, it re-entered the atmosphere and burned up completely. Both missions were quickly reclassified as generic Cosmos satellites to hide their true purpose from the world. The American press dubbed these mysterious launches Marsnik, a combination of Mars and Sputnik, but Soviet officials never acknowledged their existence. This began a pattern of secrecy that would define their Mars program for over a decade, with failures systematically erased from public records while engineers worked frantically behind closed doors. The first success. November 1962 brought a breakthrough that, honestly, changed everything. Mars 1 became the first Soviet spacecraft to successfully escape Earth's gravitational pull and head toward the Red Planet. Launched on November 1st, this 894-kilogram probe represented a massive leap forward in Soviet space technology. Chief designer Sergei Korolev had personally overseen the mission, equipping Mars 1 with a magnetometer, radiation detectors, cosmic dust sensors, and instruments designed to detect water vapor in the Martian atmosphere. For 124 days, the probe coasted through deep space, transmitting 61 successful communications back to Earth. Soviet mission controllers watched with growing excitement as their spacecraft traveled 193 million kilometers toward Mars. Then, on March 21, 1963, with Mars finally coming into view, all contact was suddenly lost. The most likely cause was a gas leak in the attitude control system, causing the spacecraft's antenna to drift off alignment. Mars 1 had proven interplanetary flight was possible, establishing the Soviet Union as a legitimate competitor in the race to explore other worlds. But it would remain forever silent in the void. The plasma engine experiment. Late 1964 witnessed the launch of Zond 2, carrying revolutionary technology that, honestly, wouldn't become mainstream for decades. Soviet engineers had equipped this 950-kilogram spacecraft with 6 experimental plasma thrusters, cutting-edge propulsion systems using electrically charged gas instead of traditional chemical rockets. Mission director Georgy Babakin believed these ion drives could provide precise course corrections during the long journey to Mars. The probe also carried an infrared spectrometer specifically designed to detect potential vegetation on the Martian surface, a bold scientific gamble that really reflected Soviet optimism about finding life. For nearly 6 months, Zond 2 flew steadily toward its target, with the plasma engines performing flawlessly during initial tests. Ground controllers conducted several successful engine burns, proving the revolutionary propulsion system worked in the harsh environment of deep space. But as the spacecraft approached Mars in August 1965, telemetry signals began weakening dramatically. Ground control lost all contact just as Zond 2 flew past Mars at a distance of approximately 1,500 kilometers. The probe had missed its flyby target by mere hundreds of miles, another agonizing near success that demonstrated Soviet engineering capabilities while highlighting the brutal challenges of interplanetary navigation. The mystery gap. Between 1965 and 1969, something extraordinary happened. The Soviet Mars program went completely dark. There were no public launches, no mission announcements, no press coverage whatsoever. Western intelligence agencies, honestly, they noticed this suspicious silence and began questioning what the USSR was planning behind closed doors. Internal documents later revealed that Soviet engineers were working frantically on their most ambitious project yet, simultaneous orbiter-lander missions that, well, would make American efforts look primitive by comparison. Chief designer Sergei Korolev's death in January 1966 had thrown the program into chaos, but his successor, Vasily Mishin, pushed forward with even grander plans. Teams worked around the clock developing heavy-lift proton rockets, advanced communication systems, and sophisticated landing capsules capable of soft touchdown on the Martian surface. The 4-year silence wasn't abandonment. It was preparation for an assault on Mars unlike anything attempted before. Secret facilities across the Soviet Union manufactured hundreds of specialized components, from heat shields designed to withstand Martian atmospheric entry to miniaturized scientific instruments capable of surviving the journey. By 1969, they had built the largest, most advanced interplanetary spacecraft in human history, ready to claim the Red Planet for the Soviet Union. The Great Explosions. March 27, 1969 brought one of the most catastrophic failures in Soviet space history. Mars 1969A, a massive bus-sized spacecraft loaded with cutting-edge instruments, sat atop a 190-foot Proton K rocket at Baikonur. The mission was designed to place a heavy orbiter around Mars while simultaneously landing a surface probe, an unprecedented dual achievement that would, honestly, humiliate NASA's smaller efforts. At T0, the 4 first-stage engines ignited with 2.4 million pounds of thrust, lifting the enormous payload skyward. Then, 51 seconds after liftoff, disaster struck. The rocket exploded in a fireball so massive it shattered windows in villages 40 kilometers away. Flaming debris rained across the Kazakh steppes for miles, with wreckage scattered across an area larger than Manhattan. 5 days later, Soviet engineers tried again with Mars 1969B. This time, the first stage worked perfectly, but during stage separation, the upper stage failed catastrophically. The multi-million-dollar spacecraft tumbled back into Earth's atmosphere and disintegrated over the Pacific Ocean. 2 state-of-the-art Mars missions had been obliterated within a single week, representing months of preparation and millions of rubles lost in spectacular fashion. First contact with Mars. November 1971 marked the moment Soviet technology finally touched another world. Mars 2 and Mars 3 represented the USSR's most sophisticated interplanetary missions ever attempted, each carrying both an orbiter and a landing capsule. Mars 2 arrived first on November 27, with its lander screaming into the thin Martian atmosphere at over 20,000 kilometers per hour. But catastrophe struck when the parachute system failed to deploy properly. The descent module crashed, becoming the first human-made object to impact Mars, though not exactly as planned. 4 days later, Mars 3 approached for its landing attempt during one of the worst global dust storms ever recorded on Mars. The massive storm covered nearly the entire planet, creating atmospheric conditions that would challenge even modern spacecraft. Miraculously, everything worked perfectly. The parachutes deployed, the retro rockets fired, and the lander touched down softly in the Martian soil. For 90 seconds, Soviet mission control received clear signals from the red planet's surface, including the first attempted television transmission from Mars. Then, abruptly, the transmission died. Mars 3 had achieved the first successful soft landing on Mars, but survived less than 2 minutes in the hostile environment. The Lost Rover. Hidden inside Mars 3's landing capsule was a revolutionary piece of technology that, honestly, never got its chance to make history. Prop M, Pribor Otsenki Prokotomosti Mars, was the world's first interplanetary rover, a 4.5-kilogram robotic explorer designed to photograph the Martian surface and analyze soil composition. Built by Soviet engineers at Lavochkin, this lunchbox-sized robot moved on metal skis rather than wheels, connected to its mothership by a 15-meter tether that would transmit power and data. Prop M carried a dynamic penetrometer to test soil density and twin cameras for stereo photography. The rover was programmed to deploy automatically once Mars 3 confirmed a successful landing, waddling away from the lander like a mechanical insect exploring alien terrain. Its mission plan called for a systematic survey of the landing site, taking photographs and measurements that would guide future Soviet expeditions. But when the lander's systems failed after 90 seconds, Prop M never received its activation command. The tiny robot's computers never awakened, its cameras never opened, and its skis never touched Martian soil. For 50 years, this tiny Soviet robot has sat motionless inside Mars 3, buried somewhere in the Martian dust, humanity's first rover, forever waiting for a signal that will never come. The cover-up campaign. You know, the Soviet Union really perfected the art of making space failures disappear completely. Mission planners developed an elaborate system where any Mars probe that failed to leave Earth orbit would be immediately reclassified as a Cosmos satellite, a generic designation used for military payloads. This clever move allowed Soviet officials to claim they were simply testing Earth-orbiting technology, rather than attempting interplanetary exploration. It wasn't until decades later that Western analysts discovered the true nature of these missions through declassified documents and defector testimonies. For instance, Cosmos 21 was actually Mars 2 MV-4A, a Mars flyby probe that never left orbit. Cosmos 419 was really Mars 8, a sophisticated orbiter-lander combination destroyed during launch. At least 6 additional Mars missions were hidden behind Cosmos designations, their true purposes buried in classified archives. Soviet engineers worked under tremendous pressure, knowing that failure meant not just technical setbacks but political humiliation that could end careers and send families to gulags. Success would be trumpeted worldwide as proof of communist superiority, but failure would be erased from history as if the missions never existed at all. This systematic deception created a false narrative that Soviet space exploration was more successful than reality. The final attempts. By 1973, the Soviet Mars program was bleeding money and credibility, but engineers pushed forward with 4 final missions that would either secure their place in history or end their Martian dreams forever. Mars 4, Mars 5, Mars 6, and Mars 7 represented the USSR's last coordinated assault on the Red Planet. Mars 4 was designed as an orbiter but suffered a computer malfunction and flew past Mars without entering orbit, becoming an accidental interplanetary probe. Mars 5 successfully orbited Mars and transmitted 60 images before radio failure ended the mission after just 9 days. Mars 6 achieved partial success, transmitting atmospheric data during descent before going silent just seconds before landing, tantalizingly close to becoming the second successful Mars lander. Mars 7 missed the planet entirely due to a mid-course correction failure, sailing helplessly past its target and into permanent solar orbit. The atmospheric data from Mars 6 proved invaluable, providing the first direct measurements of Martian air pressure and temperature during descent. After this series of near misses and partial successes, the Soviet Union quietly abandoned their Mars program. American Viking missions in 1976 would finally achieve what the Soviets had been desperately trying to accomplish for 16 years. The legacy of secrets. Today, declassified documents reveal that the Soviet Mars program was far more extensive and ambitious than the world ever knew. 19 separate missions were launched between 1960 and 1973, with only a handful achieving even partial success. Chief designer Sergei Korolev had envisioned Soviet cities on Mars by the 1980s, complete with mining operations and permanent colonies. Secret facilities across the USSR manufactured hundreds of spacecraft components, advanced life support systems, and even prototype spacesuits for Martian explorers. Internal reports from the 1960s show that Soviet leaders allocated massive resources to Mars exploration, viewing it as the ultimate propaganda victory over American capitalism. The program consumed enormous amounts of the Soviet space budget, with some estimates suggesting Mars missions received more funding than the lunar program during peak years. But technical limitations, political pressure, and budget constraints doomed most missions before they could prove their worth. The real tragedy wasn't just the engineering failures, it was the systematic erasure of these bold attempts from history. Thousands of Soviet scientists and engineers dedicated their careers to reaching Mars, only to have their efforts classified and forgotten for half a century. The Soviet Mars program remains one of history's greatest space secrets. 19 missions launched in complete secrecy, with most failures buried under Cold War classification. While NASA celebrated public victories, Soviet engineers were quietly achieving the first Mars impact, first soft landing, and first orbital insertion around the Red Planet. Their revolutionary technologies were decades ahead of their time. Though political secrecy erased their achievements from textbooks, these forgotten pioneers paved the way for every Mars mission that followed. Which Soviet Mars secret shocked you most? Drop your thoughts below. If you loved these hidden space mysteries, hit that like button, share with fellow space enthusiasts, and subscribe to Future Facts for more incredible declassified discoveries.